According to Gallup's State of the Global Workplace, only 15% of employees around the world are engaged at work, which means one of two things are predominantly happening at work. Employees are viewing the workplace in a negative fashion or doing the bare minimum in order to just get by. Terry McDougall is on a mission to change just that. She's an executive coach helping businesses, teams, organizations, and leaders achieve superior growth when individuals believe they can reach their fullest potential. McDougall joined me this week to discuss how she helps organizations from all over the world maximize their productivity inside and outside of the office. And she also says that our goals are achievable just as long as we believe there is a pathway towards attaining them. Are you ready to get inspired to do your very best at work? Well, after hearing from McDougall, you'll get the incentive to do just that. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. If you're ready, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program, and I'm excited to learn all about your work as an executive coach. Great to see you again. Long time no see, and happy Monday.
Well, happy Monday to you, Kevin. I'm really happy to be here with you.
Absolutely, Terry, and I know that your life's work and your business is helping organizations, business leaders, and teams sort of realize their potential and full growth if they sort of all row in the same direction. So I'm wondering if we could start our conversation by you telling me all the great work you do to help leaders and teams maximize their potential and production.
Absolutely. So when I work with individuals, typically it's because they have kind of gotten to a crossroads where they've been trying things and they're not getting the expected results out of what they've been trying. And there's an old saying that what got you here isn't going to get you there. And as people face new challenges at work or maybe trying to balance work and their personal life, a lot of times they'll run into obstacles and they're not sure how to get past them. And so I work with people to get clarity on what their goals are. Most of the time it's around work, but sometimes there's a little bit of the inner, the personal interwoven in there. And I will work with them to develop or I call co-create a roadmap to get them from where they are to where they'd like to go. And as we're putting the roadmap together, a lot of times we come across skills that maybe there's some gaps in the skill sets. So we'll work on developing the skills that they need to successfully reach their goals. And importantly, we also work on shifting that mindset to a mindset where they really believe that the thing that they want is possible, because it's very common. I've seen that, and certainly I've done this too, that sometimes we'll have a little bit of a self-protective mindset, meaning a little bit of a negative mindset, and we'll say to ourselves like, oh, I'm not sure if this is going to happen, or they never hire anybody that's like me, or I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to make it. Those kind of thought processes actually stand in the way of us reaching our goals. So importantly, I really try to help them get into that possibility mindset and start looking for the opportunities. So that's what yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so sorry. Yeah, I was just going to ask as a follow-up, the importance that you work with people in terms of developing their energy and motivation to create a culture that works at work.
Hmm. Yeah. So that, I described how I work with individuals. The way that I work with organizations is to help them build a culture where we have respect for each individual and the way that they're approaching work. I am, kind of building on what we were talking about on that Success Summit last week. Um, I think that organizations are strong and agile when they can fully tap into the knowledge and the wisdom and the skills and the talent of everyone in their organization. And everyone speaks, everybody has a voice, but not everybody's voice is heard in your typical organization. And so what I try to do when I'm working with companies is to help them understand the differences between people's styles and what they need to feel safe enough to step up and share the knowledge and the information and talent that they have. And also for those people who are, maybe the stronger voices that feel like they're always going to be heard, for them to understand what they're losing out on when they don't make space or to allow other people's voices to be heard. So that's sort of the foundation. And I actually have an assessment, which is called the Five Voices Assessment, that helps people start to understand themselves, because we really need to know ourselves in order to lead ourselves first. And when we can lead ourselves, and then we can lead others in a way that is more effective. Because a lot of times people will have big blind spots and they don't really, consciously realize the impact, whether it's positive or negative, that they're having on the situation. And once we're able to understand that as individuals, and then we can have a more positive impact on the situation. But when we're able to bring these kinds of lessons into organizations, and the assessment's just the first step. I've got like a whole set of tools that I'll bring in to allow the organization in some ways to sort of learn a common lesson and a common language, so that they understand how to talk to each other, but also that they have sort of common touchstones that they can go to, and they understand certain tools and so forth that they can apply in the workplace. And when you're able to sort of cascade that within an organization, that really helps to build a positive culture that, and I'll throw out a stat, research has shown that the average organization, that they're only getting about 58% of the productivity out of their teams that they possibly could. And so you can just imagine that, for a small investment to start to unlock the potential within an organization and within the teams there, that it would more than pay for itself to invest in that kind of training to unlock that potential. Because can you imagine if, you went from 58% to even 68%, like what that would mean in terms of employee engagement, in terms of less turnover within the organization, in terms of innovation. It really could be amazing, just a small increase in people feeling like they're needed, and that they're free to bring their best to their organization.
Absolutely. The Bureau of Labor and Statistics reports that in 2020, the unemployment rate for individuals with disabilities stood at 12.6%, which is an increase of 5.3 percentage points over the previous year. And McDougall says that it's important that companies and organizations reflect the marketplace they're intending to serve, and that infusing individuals with disabilities into the workforce can only be viewed as a net positive and a competitive advantage?
Well, I think that it's important for the organization to reflect the marketplace that they're selling into. And it's important to be able to understand the different perspectives that people have. And I think that it's been, you know, we've spent way too long with people that are making assumptions that their experience is the same as the experience of other people. And so what ends up happening is that the messaging, the development of products, the types of people that are hired, like there's assumptions made about, maybe people's abilities or what people want, that they're never checking with the actual people or people that are like the people that they want to sell to say, what is it that you need? And, I think it's really important to check in and to find out, like, what is it that people need? What would work there? When we don't do that, we're missing out on opportunities. And so I think that hiring people with disabilities or anybody who maybe is different than what the typical has been. I think that it's important for organizations to look within themselves and say, are we reflecting the marketplace that we're trying to sell into?
Yeah,
And
yeah, absolutely. And you talked to me earlier about the building blocks you bring to organizations in order to help them build an
mhm.
inclusive and welcoming culture. So my next follow-up to that is how do you think organizations can effectively prosper in the face of prosperity, if that makes any sense?
Well, I mean, I think that once people get a certain level of awareness, they typically don't go back to a place where they're unaware, if that makes sense. So once, in some ways, if you think about like taking the blinders off, once you've started to see the possibilities, I think it's really impossible to unsee the possibilities. And so I think it can be an incredible competitive advantage for organizations to realize that, maybe what they're seeing in terms of the potential of their current employees, or the potential of, future employees, once they start to realize that there's more there than maybe what they've assumed, that there's opportunity there. I mean, if you think about the fact that, I'm sure that as someone who has a disability, that you've probably been underestimated many times.
On a daily basis, you have to overcome obstacles in every facet of life. Absolutely.
Right. And I look at that and think, and we talked about this on the Success Summit a little bit too, that I think that people that have had to, work harder to pursue their goals often have that resilience, and they've got that grit that is going to make them superior to your, just average person that hasn't had to overcome as much. And, I think that sometimes, when things are more difficult, that it makes us stronger. And I think when organizations are willing to, explore that a little bit and say, well, maybe I need to take a second look at my assumptions and, take a chance on some people that are different than people that we've typically hired and see how they do, support them and see how they do. I think that what has happened in the past sometimes is that, organizations that maybe were, started and run by white men, they just assumed that whatever they needed is what the next group of people that come in, whether it's people of color or women, or, people that have gender differences or gender preference differences or disabilities or whatever, the other, right? That they're just going to assume that, well, whatever I needed is they're going to need the same thing. And sometimes I mean, I thought it was really interesting when when you shared with me earlier that usually the type of uh, adjustments that people with disabilities need, it's maybe $500 investment, right, on average. I mean, that's not a lot of money when you think about what the return on the investment is, right? But just to even ask, like, what can I do to help make you more successful? To me, I feel like that's going to pay back many times over because you're going to get a perspective from people that are different, that is different from what you've had. And again, I come from a marketing background. That's a competitive advantage. When you see things that other organizations don't see because you're willing to, tap into an untapped gold mine of information and perspective that you have within your organization just by asking, by supporting the people that you've got in your organization and asking them, like, what are we missing? What could we do differently to be more competitive in the environment or in the marketplace? I mean, to me, it's just smart. That's smart business.
Yeah, the saying for the discoverability network was seize the opportunity to advance your business by hiring someone with a disability, right? So,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, and then building on the diversity and culture discussion and the competitive advantage as well. When we
Hmm.
when we look at diversifying workforces and competitive advantages, I'm wondering your thoughts on the most integral ways that they're sort of intertwined. If you diversify your workforces, what sort of competitive advantages specifically do you think are open to employees and also the employers in terms of boosting the morale in the workforce?
Yeah, well, I think that a lot of times when I'm working with individuals, sometimes they felt pretty beat up because maybe they've been shut out of opportunities, or that I mean, kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, that sometimes people will, kind of get into this mindset of like, oh, well, I'm probably not going to get that because of whatever the reason why they're different. And then that could be disability, that could be gender, that could be age, that could be anything. Like, we tell ourselves these things, right? And we tell ourselves these things to protect ourselves. But as individuals, if we can look and say, let me think about how I'm different and how that could help a company to make more money, save more money, or reduce risk. Because those are really the three ways that employees can add value, and really believe that our difference, whether it's our difference of perspective or different of experience or whatever, if we can flip it and say, how could this benefit an organization, and really weave that into what our talking points are as we're networking, as we're interviewing, or even if we're working there, to like shift our mindset to believe I'm here for a reason, and I'm going to look for these opportunities to bring my difference to the forefront, so that, I mean, couple things like that, I can make it safe for other people to share their differences as well, but also to help the organization to find the opportunities that they're missing when they're not tapping into that difference of perspective. So that's from the employee or candidate standpoint. From the company standpoint, to me, I think that, and this is sort of like is pivoting off of what I was just saying about when we as individuals share what's different about us, if we're willing to be vulnerable that way. But if companies can make it safe for people to say, if they can say, we value everyone, we believe that everyone has something important to share, um, that makes it safe. People don't have to put so much energy into protecting themselves or hiding or being fearful that, oh, if I show up as I actually am, that I'm going to be put down for that, or I'm going to be excluded or something like that. If companies can make it safe, and then people will allow the things that they know, they will share their opinions, they will share their insights, And I think that the more that each person shares what they see, like, I don't know if you guys have this in Canada, but here, like if you're on public transportation, they have this saying, if you see something, say something, right? Like if there's a bag or something left on the train, if you see something, say something. But I think that is a good saying within organizations too. Like if you've got an idea, share that idea. But unfortunately, in some organizations, if the culture isn't open and supportive, that people see something, like they see stuff, they know that there's a problem, or they see an opportunity for, to serve a customer better, or maybe they've even had a personal experience with the product or the company that it would be helpful to share. But if they feel like they're not going to be heard, they're not going to share it. And that makes the organization weaker. And then if we flip that, if it is a safe environment and people share, it makes the organization stronger.
Yeah, I know that you have your own podcast called the Marketing Mambo, where you talk to marketing leaders from all across the world about how marketing can positively affect the workplace in different settings. So I'm curious, Terry, if you can tell me all about the podcast you host and the messages that you hope to deliver through the platform.
Yeah. Well, so, I was a marketer for 30 years before I made the pivot in 2017 to become a full-time executive and career coach. And I really love the field of marketing for one thing, because it's sort of at that intersection of creativity and driving results for the business. And I tend to coach a lot of people in the marketing and advertising fields. And I was actually talking with a client of mine who is a marketing consultant, and just having a conversation. And we got off on a topic that we both found really interesting. And she just made a comment. Wow, I really love this conversation. I think it would make a really good podcast episode. And that, like a light bulb just went off over my head, because I'd been a guest on a lot of podcasts. And when she said that, I thought, yeah, I kind of miss having conversations about marketing. And I love marketers just because they are, creative people that get things done. And so I just thought, well, okay, this could be a really good way for me to, scratch an itch that I kind of miss talking with marketers. So I basically just, follow my heart. If I meet somebody who has anything to do with marketing and I would like to talk to them, I'll invite them on my podcast. So I've had everything from, senior level marketing leaders. I've had, some people who got into marketing from interesting backgrounds. Like one of my early guests, she was an electrical engineering student in college. And I thought, well, that's an interesting background to become a marketer, because most of the time marketers, they study business or communications or something like that, or maybe graphic design. So I thought that was interesting. The episode that came out today, I mean, this is maybe a little bit of a stretch, but it actually aligns very closely with my philosophy about expanding that overlap between professional success and personal happiness. I had a guy, his name's Trav Bell, and he's trademarked his tagline, which is the bucket list guy. He's Australian, and he was a successful entrepreneur. He had a chain of gyms. He was a personal trainer and that kind of stuff. And he pivoted to encourage people to go out and really, do the things in their lives that they want to do. And he's just done all kinds of incredible things. Can't even begin to scratch the surface, but people can listen to the podcast to learn more about things he's done. But I think most importantly, what he's done is inspired people to step up and really, do everything that they dream in their lives. And I love sharing that kind of perspective, especially when people get really bogged down with thinking that they've got to sacrifice a lot of their personal happiness to be quote unquote successful at work. I've had I've had change management consultants on, because a lot of times in marketing, people are, they're encouraging change. I've got a guy coming up in a few weeks. His name is, I think it's Jim Morris. He's the tagline guy. He has like a 40+ year career in advertising, and he's written a lot of famous taglines. And I think the most famous one is the Flintstones vitamins. I think it's like 10 million kids and growing, or something like that is the tagline. So when I come across people that have something to do with marketing, and I think they'd be interesting to talk to, I get them on the podcast, and
Yeah,
really about
yeah,
inspiration.
absolutely. Life in podcasting, it's all about networking. It's all about who you know and where you know them from, right?
Yeah, yeah, and it's been really, really fun. And much like you and me, like we wouldn't have ever met had it not been for podcasting. We were introduced by people that we were on their podcasts, right? And so it's and this is a cross-border collaboration that we're doing, and I've talked to people all over the world, and I love it. It's just so fun.
Yeah, the value of human connection can open so many doors, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Terry, you brought this up in the last answer you gave. So, I'm also curious to get your thoughts as an executive coach and someone who had spent all those years in marketing about effective career pivots and what goes
Mhm.
into that, and your definition of personal growth versus fulfillment as well.
Okay. Well, with career pivots, what I've seen, I mean, this is what I experienced myself, and what I've seen with a lot of my clients is that, much like the proverbial frog that, starts in the lukewarm water, and then the degrees of the water go up bit by bit, and the next thing you know, the frog is boiling to death. That can happen a lot of times in our jobs, right? We just get up and go to work every day, and maybe a job that was really satisfying, by degrees, ends up sort of shifting to a place where it's not satisfying, because there's always I think that probably the perfect ratio is 70% satisfying and fun, and 30% just stuff you have to do that maybe you don't like, right? I mean, that's just the nature of work. I think it's rare that somebody's going to have 100% satisfaction in their jobs. But I think that what can happen is that, like, slowly but surely, it goes from 70/30 to 60/40 to 50/50 to 40/60. And when that shifts, and it doesn't kind of shift back, it's not like just a season that we're going through. I think a lot of times we can say, like, oh my gosh, like what's next for me? And that can be really difficult. And I think that a big factor in that is just the fear, because we sometimes define ourselves by what we do for a living, and obviously there's the whole income and compensation issue. Like, our job is part of what we need to survive. We need to have the money to pay the bills and all of that kind of thing. And sometimes I think people can, that fear around change can block what what they'd really like to do. But I really encourage people to, like, go deep and say, what would be satisfying for you? Like, what, maybe, when you started your career, there was a dream that you had that you didn't do. You put it on the back shelf. Like, maybe look deep inside yourself and say, what would I really like to do? And then I often have exercises, or I will often assign exercises to my clients for them to really, write down all of their skills, and for us to, like, kind of pull them apart in a way, to look at them, to say, how could I potentially recombine skills I have in different ways to make them marketable? So and then I also see this very often, where people will say, well, I know what I want to do, but here's all the reasons why I can't do it. And I believe that if you really have a strong goal, something that you really want, you can figure out a way to make it happen. But that's going back to what I was saying at the beginning of our conversation here, that it's critical that you begin to believe that what you want is possible. And, it doesn't mean that it's going to happen automatically, and it doesn't mean that it's going to happen without work or without even sacrifice. But, I think if most of us look back over our lives, we realize that most of the things that are worthwhile, we have had to work at or sacrifice a little bit for. And that's almost what makes it sweeter when we reach the goal, is that we know that we earned it, that we made it happen. It didn't just fall into our laps. So that's kind of the whole, process that I go through with people to do the career pivot. And surprisingly, I mean, I've got 3 clients in my mind that I've worked with just in the last 6 months that, came to me in the beginning, and it just looked like their situation was dire and the things that they wanted weren't likely, and they made them happen in very short uh, spans of time once they finally, had the courage to look at themselves and say, what do I want? What are the things about me that are going to make me good at this? And then starting to reach out and have conversations with people and allow themselves to be seen and considered for those kind of roles. I mean, all 3 of those clients had, when they talked to the right person, they actually ended up getting job offers within 2 to 3 weeks. So it's, it can happen. It really can. But I forgot the other part of the questions that you asked me. So
Yeah, no problem. It was just about once you, uh, your own definition of personal growth and fulfillment. How do you
yeah,
define that?
yeah. Well, that's interesting that you asked that, because I'm a super curious person, and I love learning and I love experiencing new things. And so for me, I think I mean, it's funny, I said I had the bucket list guy on today, and I don't have a bucket list, and I probably never will, because I want to honor what I want in a particular time in my life. I don't want to sit here at my age and say, okay, by the time I'm 90, I'm going to want to have done all of these things. There's certain things that I do want to do, but I also want to leave myself the space to change my mind or decide to go into a different direction, and to honor that and not feel like, oh, I failed because I didn't, go to Venice or something. I didn't ride in a gondola or something. um, but I think that growth for me is just about always learning and honoring. I don't know. I feel like I'm gonna define growth by using the word growth. It's, to me, for me, it's about new things. It's about moving forward. It's about, always checking in with myself to say, what do you want? And then really trying to make that happen in my life. To me, that's growth.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right?
Right, right, exactly. And I think that there's a real balance. And actually, I tend to work with high achievers. I say I work with high achievers who are successful but not satisfied. And one of the things, and that's me. I mean, I'm a reformed high achiever who's successful but not satisfied. I'm really trying to spend more time in honoring, checking in with myself and honoring, you know, not judging myself harshly. But I do find that, for a lot of high achievers, that they've gotten to where they are by really driving themselves really hard. And when they don't achieve the things that they think they quote unquote should achieve, that they'll kind of beat themselves up and they'll use that as a motivator. And, I think that what that ultimately does is drains energy out of them, because they're using that energy to judge themselves and beat themselves up, rather than, being present and saying, okay, well, I'm going to honor this. Maybe you were tired and you needed a night to just veg out and watch Netflix, right? Maybe, but whatever happens happens, and we can have choices about that, and including sometimes not driving ourselves to achieve and to grow. Like, we're allowed to be, and we're allowed to enjoy the moments. And sometimes, gifts just come to us in life without us having to, quote unquote, achieve them. I mean, honestly, some of the best gifts in my life came to me accidentally. I won't say that I didn't do anything to make them happen, but I didn't know that these things weren't going to, that I didn't know that these things were going to happen if I did X, right? I just met people and, you know, had conversations with them, and then later they maybe introduced me to somebody where something cool happened from it. But it wasn't like I was saying, oh, if I meat Kevin and I go on his podcast, this is what's going to happen. I'm doing it because I'm enjoying this moment, you know. I When I met you, I thought, okay, this is such a, interesting, smart guy that's doing cool things. I'd love to talk to him. Who knows what might come of this? But that's almost the excitement of life, is to say, like, what might happen, right? If we go out there and we sort of like push the envelope a little bit, like, what might happen? What's out there? It's cool. It's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And while you were giving that answer, I was thinking of the analogy of you have to pour some liquid into the own cup of your own life before you can give it back to other people, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's funny. A question that a lot of people have asked me is like, oh, what's a book that made a big difference in your life? And there's a book that I read in my early 20s called The Art of Selfishness. And I remember whenever I started reading that book, I almost felt like, it was taboo to read a book about the art of selfishness. That just seems so selfish. And that was something that I was raised to, think like, oh, you shouldn't be selfish. And it really shifted my thought process around what that meant. And really what it means is caring for yourself, honoring yourself, and realizing that, like, when we honor ourselves, and when we care for ourselves, it gives us the energy and the centeredness to care for other people. Um, and I've seen a pattern in my coaching clients that a lot of times they're selfless, meaning that they're like putting other people first all of the time. And then what happens is that they get resentful because, they get tired, they get exhausted, maybe their health and, mental, emotional, physical health are not doing well because they're not spending the time to care for themselves. And, I actually think that ends up being a little bit selfish, because sometimes I think we care for others because we want them to care for us. But if we care for ourselves first, and then we have all the energy to also care for others, and we don't expect, them to come back and care for us, you know, um, if that's making any sense at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to wrap up our conversation today by asking you about your own personal legacy and how you think you would want that to be defined. And away from the office, what do you like to do for fun there, Terry?
Well, in terms of my own personal legacy, it's funny because that seems like so grandiose. But I want to make a difference in the life of other people. I want to help other people step fully into who they were meant to be. And I don't know who they were meant to be, but I want to encourage them to figure that out, and to realize it's okay, and to help them get over any hurdles that are standing between where they are right now and where they'd like to be. Because I think that when people, are really following their own purpose in life, that they're happier, they're a great example for other people, they can help other people to also find their purpose in life. There's just so many dividends that are paid by that. And, I don't expect, and I would never even want like a big statue to be like, here's Terry, she helped a lot of people. I want people to say like, maybe whatever years later, and they're talking to their kids like, oh, I worked with a coach, when I had a problem and she helped me. And for them to know that that helped them get over a hurdle that got them onto smoother roads to, because, you know if people are happier, the people around them are happier, the world is better, more interesting, cool things are happening. So that's what I want my legacy to be, is just to be a catalyst to help other people step into their full potential. And then what do I like to do in my free time? I like to hike with my husband. I like to, I mean, when I can, I like to travel. Haven't done enough of that in the last couple of years, unfortunately. Um, I I'm part of an improv group. I don't perform, but everybody else in my group actually is, they perform, but I get together with them and just go through different exercises in improv, and it's fun. It reminds me of being like a little elementary school kid on the playground, playing make believe. It's just super, super fun. I love it. And then, I do my podcast. I mean, I love what I do for a living. And so I get so much satisfaction out of that. I like to hang out with my kids. So,
And meet interesting people, right?
and meet interesting people. I love that. Yes.
Yeah, so finally, Terry, tell me, if people want to get connected with you, what's the best way they can do that?
Well, they can visit my website, which is terrybmcdougall.com. And if they're interested and they can check me out there, I've got a blog and all kinds of other information. But if they want to set up some time with me, they can get time on my calendar on my website. I'm also very active on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to get connected with your listeners. My handle there is Terry B. McDougall. If people are interested in my podcast, it's called Marketing Mambo, and you can find that on any of the podcast platforms or marketingmambo.net. And then finally, if you want to check out my book, it's called Winning the Game of Work, and it's available on Amazon worldwide.
Fantastic, Terry. We've known each other for just over 3.5 weeks, and I've enjoyed our interactions together, and I enjoyed our conversation this morning. So I want to thank you for your time, energy, and efforts on my behalf. It's most appreciated.
Kevin, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation today.